The envelope was thick, expensive, the kind of paper that feels heavy with bad news. I held it in my kitchen, the morning sun catching the embossed return address of a law firm I didn't recognize. My hands didn't shake. They were eerily, terribly still. For a moment, all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator and a single, clear thought. This is it. She has finally made it legal. After all the whispered arguments and the cold silences across my own dining table, my daughter was now speaking to me through a lawyer. I took a breath, my fingers tracing the sharp edge of the paper. This wasn't just a letter. It was the final, written proof that the greatest fortune of my life had become the price of my only child. My life, for the longest time, was measured in small, reliable increments. The click of the time clock at the small-town library where I worked for 32 years. The steady rhythm of turning pages, shelving books, and helping students find their way. It was a quiet life, a modest life, but it was ours. My husband, Arjun, was a teacher. Our world was built on lesson plans and library due dates, on packed lunches and saving for our daughter Maya's college fund, one grocery coupon at a time. We lived for Maya. Every sacrifice felt like an investment in a brighter future for her. We saw her brilliance, her ambition, even as a little girl. She wanted more than our little town could offer, and we wanted that for her too. We poured everything into her education, her dreams. When Arjun passed too young, a quiet heart attack on a Tuesday afternoon, the library and Maya became my twin anchors. She was in law school then, a fierce, beautiful young woman who promised me through her own tears, "I'll make you so proud, Mom, I'll take care of everything." After Arjun, the days were grayer. I found solace in the routine of work, in the familiar smell of old books. The idea of a fortune was a fairy tale, the plot of a novel I might reshelve in fiction. Then it happened. A distant great uncle, a man I'd met perhaps twice as a child, passed away. He had no immediate family, and for reasons known only to him, he left his entire estate to me. It wasn't just money. It was a bewildering avalanche of it. Shares in companies I'd never heard of, a portfolio managed by a stern man in a city 5 hours away, and a beautiful old apartment in the city that was worth more than I could comprehend. Overnight, the woman who budgeted for a new winter coat was responsible for wealth that felt abstract, almost fictional. My first call was to Maya. Her reaction was pure, unfiltered joy. "Mom, this is incredible. This changes everything." She was ecstatic. We cried together on the phone, imagining a future without struggle. I told her, my voice thick with emotion, "This is for us, Beta, for our family. For your future." In that moment, her happiness felt like the truest part of the entire windfall. I decided to be prudent. I took an early retirement from the library, a bittersweet farewell. I moved into the city apartment. It felt too large, too quiet, but Maya encouraged it. "You deserve this, Mom. Live a little." She began visiting more often, her eyes wide as she took in the high ceilings, the view. Our conversations subtly shifted. She talked about the potential of the portfolio, the legacy we were building. She introduced me to her fiancé, Rohan, a sharp, handsome man in finance. He spoke of asset classes and wealth management with an easy confidence that both impressed and slightly intimidated me. I was naive. I saw their interest as care, their advice as protection. I signed papers they put in front of me, trusting their expertise. "It's just to streamline things, Mom," Maya would say, kissing my cheek, "to protect what's yours." I felt a flutter of unease sometimes, a ghost of a feeling when Rohan's explanations became too rapid, when Maya's questions about the will and the deeds grew specific. But I brushed it aside. This was my daughter, my brilliant, ambitious daughter who only wanted the best for me. The first real fracture was small, almost imperceptible. I mentioned wanting to use some funds to set up a small scholarship in Arjun's name at the local school. Maya's smile tightened. "That's a lovely sentiment, Mom," she said, pouring us more tea, "but let's think strategically. Philanthropy is great, but it needs to be structured for maximum impact and tax benefits." The way she said sentiment made it sound like a weakness. I let the subject drop, the dream of that scholarship fading like a forgotten bookmark. Then came the wedding plans. Maya and Rohan wanted a grand affair, a destination wedding. My initial happiness for her was quickly shadowed by the scale of it. One evening, over dinner at my apartment, they laid out the estimated costs. The number was staggering. I hesitated. Maya, beta, this seems so much. Could we perhaps do something beautiful here and use the rest for a down payment on a home for you too? Her face fell. Not into sadness, but into a cold, disappointed mask. Mom, she said, her voice low, this is my wedding, the wedding. This is what the money is for, to create memories, to show our standing. What's the point of having it if we can't celebrate it properly? Rohan nodded, placing a hand over hers. It's an investment in our social capital, auntie, important for my career, for our future network. I felt old and foolish in that moment. My idea of a future, security, comfort, quiet generosity was crashing into theirs. Spectacle, status, capital. I looked at my daughter's expectant face, the girl I'd read bedtime stories to, and saw a stranger calculating a return on investment. I gave a slow, hesitant nod. Okay, I whispered, if it's what you really want. The victory in her eyes didn't feel like joy, it felt like a concession she'd won. The wedding planning became a full-time siege. My apartment became their command center. Swatches of fabric, venue brochures, caterers' proposals littered my living room. My role, I quickly learned, was not to participate, but to approve and pay. Invoices were forwarded to me with a brief, please settle this, Mom. The sums were always larger than discussed. One afternoon, Maya and Rohan were having a heated discussion in the next room. I was bringing them some lemonade. I paused at the doorway, not meaning to eavesdrop, but their voices were clear. The prenup is non-negotiable, Rohan, Maya said, her tone the same one she used to explain legalities to me. I understand, Maya. But the clause about the apartment, your mother's apartment, being part of your separate trust, are you sure she'll agree to transfer the deed? She seems attached to it. My blood ran cold. I held the tray, the glasses clinking softly. Maya's sigh was one of mild irritation. She'll agree, she doesn't understand these things, it's for the best, it protects the asset from any future complications. We'll present it as a formality for the wedding trust. She'll sign. She always signs. I must have made a sound, a tiny intake of breath. The conversation stopped. I backed away silently, placed the tray on the kitchen counter, and walked to my bedroom on unsteady legs. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. She always signs. The words echoed, each one a pinprick to my heart. This wasn't care, this wasn't protection, this was a strategy, and I was the mark. The betrayal wasn't in their wanting the apartment. It was in the quiet conspiracy, the patronizing certainty that I was too simple, too emotional to manage what was mine, that my trust was just a tool for their convenience. The mother who had once held her hand crossing the street was now a legal obstacle to be maneuvered around. I didn't confront them, not then. A strange calm settled over me, the calm that comes when a terrible suspicion is confirmed. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a hollow, observant stillness. I went back out, smiled thinly, said I had a headache. They left soon after, full of plans for a meeting with a florist. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room of my beautiful, cursed apartment. The city lights glittered outside, a world of transactions I was only beginning to understand. The envelope from the lawyer would come weeks later, a formal request to discuss the transfer of certain properties into a marital trust. But the true betrayal, the inciting one, had already happened. It happened in a conversation I was never meant to hear, reducing a lifetime of love to a single, exploitable trait, my trust in my own child. The envelope, when it arrived, was merely the formal declaration of a war that had already begun in whispers. I did not open it immediately. I placed it on the kitchen counter, where it sat like a silent accusation for 2 full days. I went about my routines, making tea, watering the plants, taking short walks in the nearby park. I was trying to find the woman I used to be, the one who believed a problem could be solved with a hug and a heart-to-heart talk. But that woman seemed to have receded, leaving behind this older, watchful version of myself. When I finally slid the letter opener through the expensive paper, the language was dense, polite, and utterly cold. It spoke of estate planning optimization, intergenerational wealth transfer, and securing assets within the marital unit. It requested a meeting at my earliest convenience to execute the transfer of the apartment's title into a newly created trust for which Maya was the sole trustee. It was signed by a Mr. Agrawal, Maya's lawyer. I called her. My voice was surprisingly steady. Maya, I received a letter from a Mr. Agrawal. A brief pause, then her tone was bright, professional. Oh good, he's excellent, Mom. Very top tier. Rohan found him. This is just the next step we talked about. We never talked about me giving you my apartment, Maya. Another pause, shorter this time. Mom, it's not giving, it's placing it in a trust. It's still part of the family wealth, it's just managed more professionally. It protects it. For the future, for your grandchildren, a future hook baited with a promise of a joy I had longed for. The manipulation was so calculated it took my breath away. I don't want to sign over my home, Maya. The silence on the other end grew heavy. I could almost hear her recalibrating. Let's not discuss this on the phone, she said, her voice cooling. Rohan and I will come over for dinner tomorrow. We'll explain it all properly. You're getting overwhelmed and that's understandable. See you at 7. The line went dead. She had not asked how I was. She had not acknowledged my fear. She had scheduled a negotiation. They arrived the next evening bearing dessert from an exclusive patisserie. The atmosphere was strained, a parody of a family dinner. Rohan did most of the talking. He used charts on his tablet, showing me hypothetical market downturns, estate taxes, the dangers of holding illiquid assets in a single name. It was a wall of jargon designed to intimidate and confuse. Maya sat beside him, nodding, occasionally adding a soft, "It's for the best, Mom." I listened quietly, pushing my food around my plate. Finally, I set my fork down. If it's for my protection, why is the trust only in Maya's name? Why not both of us? Rohan smiled, a tight, practiced gesture. Simpler administration. Maya has the legal and financial acumen to manage it. It relieves you of the burden. The burden of owning my own home, I asked, my voice still quiet. Maya reached across the table, but her hand didn't seek mine. It patted the back of my hand like soothing a child. Please don't be difficult. Everyone does this. It's standard practice. You have to trust us. You have to trust us. The words hung in the air. The trust they were systematically destroying was now a demand. I said I would think about it. It was the only defense I had. Delay. Their disappointment was palpable, a cold wave that filled the room. As they left, Maya's goodbye kiss on my cheek felt perfunctory, a seal on a failed transaction. The pressure escalated in subtle, domestic ways. Invitations to their place dwindled. My calls went to voicemail more often, returned hours later with a brief, "Sorry, Mom," swamped with wedding stuff. The wedding itself became a weapon. Decisions were made without my input. I was sent a schedule of events with my role clearly defined. Mother of the bride, arrive by 3 p.m. Speech time 2 minutes max, seated at table 8. Then came the final invoice. It was for the entire wedding venue deposit, a sum so large it could have bought a house in my old town. The email from the wedding planner was CC'd to Maya and Rohan. The subject line read, "Urgent. Final balance due." The note below said, "As per Maya's instruction, please remit payment to the following account by Friday to avoid cancellation." I felt cornered financially and emotionally. If I paid, I was funding my own dismissal, buying a front row seat to my own marginalization. If I didn't, I would be the villain who ruined her only daughter's wedding. The loneliness during this time was a physical ache. I wandered through the spacious, quiet apartment. I missed the musty, comforting smell of the library. I missed Arjun's sensible advice. I even missed the sound of Maya's childhood laughter, a ghost that now seemed to mock me from the empty corners. I found myself looking at old photo albums, tracing the face of a little girl who believed I could fix anything with a bandage and a story. Where had she gone? Had the money created this new, cold woman, or had it simply revealed what was always there, an ambition that saw even a mother as a means to an end? My financial strain was not about lack, but about control. The portfolio manager, a kind man named Mr. Desai who had worked for my great-uncle, would call with his regular updates. I began to ask more questions. Tentative at first, then more pointed. "Mr. Desai, if I wanted to pause certain large disbursements, how would I do that?" He was perceptive. He heard the tremor in my voice. "The authority is still yours, madam," he said gently. "Until you sign it away, instructions must come directly from you, not via a family member." That call was a lifeline, a tiny thread of agency. I started to examine the papers I had already signed with Maya and Rohan's encouragement. They were copies buried in a filing cabinet. I took them to a quiet coffee shop away from the apartment that felt watched and read every line. My heart sank. Several forms had granted Maya convening authority on some of the investment accounts, allowing her to move funds under certain limits. She had never mentioned that clause. The streamlining had quietly begun stripping my control piece by piece. The emotional cost was etched into my daily life. I stopped cooking elaborate meals for one. A single boiled egg, a piece of toast, it was enough. I started keeping a small ledger not of expenses but of interactions. A sad, simple diary. Tuesday, call from Maya, 4 minutes, asked about bank transfer, did not ask about my cough. Friday, dinner, talked only of wedding costs, felt like a wallet. The entries were a stark, painful mirror. I was adrift in a sea of plenty, starving for a single genuine word. The realization was dawning, slow and grim. I was not a mother in this new story they were writing. I was a donor. A soon-to-be obsolete vessel for the wealth they felt entitled to. And the wedding was not a celebration of a union. It was the closing ceremony where the asset, me and all I had, would be successfully transferred. The pressure built until I felt I might break under the weight of their polite, relentless expectation. The breaking point, ironically, was not a shout but a whisper. I had gone to a small, independent stationery shop, a place that reminded me of my old life, to buy a proper journal. As I was leaving, I saw a familiar figure across the street outside an upscale wine bar. It was Rohan. He was with another man, clapping him on the back, laughing. I ducked back into the shop doorway, a reflex. Then I saw her. Maya emerged from the bar, joining them. She was smiling, a relaxed, easy smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She linked her arm with Rohan's. They looked like a perfect, powerful duo. I was about to turn away, feeling like a spy in my own life, when the other man, his voice carrying just enough on the evening breeze, said loudly, to the future CEO and his lucky wife, "Once that final property is in the trust, the board will see you're not just talent, you're established. Solid. It's a done deal, Rohan." Rohan raised his glass in acknowledgement, a smug, triumphant grin on his face. Maya laughed, leaning into him. "It's all about the right collateral," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "Collateral, my home, my apartment." It wasn't about protection or legacy or even greed in a simple sense. It was a business transaction, a piece of collateral to secure Rohan's promotion, to build their solid image. I was not just a naive mother, I was a stepping stone in a corporate climb. The apartment wasn't for future grandchildren. It was for a title on a business card. The world seemed to narrow to that single word, echoing in my ears. Collateral. I stood frozen in the dim doorway of the stationery shop, clutching my plain paper journal. The last veil of self-doubt was ripped away. The late-night worries that maybe I was being paranoid, too attached to bricks and mortar, that I was failing to adapt to my new reality, they vanished. This was not a family misunderstanding. This was a calculated, cold-blooded plan. My love, my loneliness, my desire to please my only child, all of it had been data points in their strategy. The wedding, the pressure, the legal letters, it was a coordinated campaign to acquire an asset. A strange, solid feeling began to replace the hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't anger yet. It was a profound, crystalline clarity. The power balance I had perceived them as the savvy experts, me as the outdated novice, was an illusion they had fostered. But the legal titles, the final authority Mr. Desai spoke of, those were still mine. They had been working to change that, but they hadn't succeeded. Not yet. I watched them hail a taxi and drive off toward their bright, successful future. I took a deep, shuddering breath of the city air, smelling of exhaust and rain. The game was not over. They had simply shown me their hand. And for the first time since the envelope arrived, I didn't feel cornered. I felt a quiet, steely resolve begin to form. It was time to learn the rules of their game, and then it was time to change them. I walked home that night, the city's noise a dull roar against the newfound silence inside me. The word collateral beat a steady, cold rhythm in my mind. I entered my apartment, and locked the door. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply sat at my kitchen table, the same table where they had presented their charts, and I began to think with a focus I hadn't felt in years. The emotional storm had passed. In its wake was a barren, clear landscape where only facts could grow. I was in a battle for my own life, my own dignity, and the only weapons I had were patience, paperwork, and the truth. My first move was one of quiet retreat. I sent Maya a text the next morning. My fingers were steady on the screen. "Good morning, Beta. Thought about what you said. You and Rohan are probably right. All this legal and money stuff is too much for me. I just want things to be peaceful. Let's talk after the wedding when things are less busy. For now, let's just focus on you being a beautiful bride." I added a heart emoji. It felt like placing a period on a sentence of surrender, but it was a tactical retreat. I needed them to believe they had won. Complacency was my ally. Her reply was swift, dripping with relieved condescension. "Oh, Mom, I'm so glad you see it that way. That's the smartest thing. Don't you worry about a thing. Just enjoy. Can't wait to see you at the final fitting next week. Love you." The "love you" felt like a receipt. With the immediate pressure off, I began my work. I was a librarian at heart. Research was my discipline. I made an appointment with Mr. Desai, the portfolio manager, but not at his office. I asked to meet at a quiet, unassuming hotel lounge. When I arrived, he saw the change in me immediately. The confused, hesitant widow was gone. In her place was a woman with a direct gaze and a list of questions. "Mr. Desai," I began, my voice low and even. "I need to understand exactly what authority I have left. I need to know what my daughter can and cannot do with the accounts where she is a co-signatory. And I need to know how to revoke that authority." He listened, nodded, and opened his briefcase. "I had wondered, madam," he said, not unkindly. "The recent transaction requests from Miss Maya, they were becoming frequent. For wedding-related expenses." He laid out statements, authority forms, and clauses. For 2 hours, he translated the legal and financial jargon into plain English. I took notes in my new journal. I learned that revoking her authority was a simple one-page form I could file with the investment house. It would take effect immediately upon receipt. I learned that the apartment deed was solely in my name and any transfer required my explicit, notarized consent in front of an independent witness. I learned that the bulk of the inherited wealth, the core portfolio, was still under my exclusive control, protected by my great-uncle's meticulous will. "He was a shrewd man," Mr. Desai said, sipping his tea. "He disliked entitlement. His will was structured to give you benefit but also time to learn, to prevent exactly this kind of rushed influence." My great-uncle, a ghost from my past, had become my silent ally. I signed the revocation forms there and then. Mr. Desai promised to courier them himself. My next stop was a lawyer, but not a corporate one. I found an elderly female attorney, Mrs. Kapoor, who specialized in family law and elder rights. Her office was modest, filled with books, not chrome. I told her my story not as an emotional plea, but as a sequence of facts. The overheard conversations, the pressure, the trust documents, the word collateral. I showed her my journal of interactions. Mrs. Kapoor listened without interruption, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. When I finished, she placed her hands flat on her desk. "You are not the first mother to become a bank instead of a parent," she said, her voice weary but firm. "What you describe is financial coercion. It is a form of abuse. The law is slow to see it, but we can build walls." Her strategy was not about attack, but about fortress building. She drafted a new, ironclad will, leaving the apartment and a modest, fixed-income trust to a local women's literacy charity in Arjun's name. The rest of the portfolio would be placed in a charitable foundation for library grants, with me as the lifelong director. Maya was named as a beneficiary of a small, symbolic trust, enough to show she was not forgotten, not enough to be a motive. "It establishes your intent," Mrs. Kapoor explained. "That the bulk of your estate was never meant for her personal enrichment." Next, we drafted a simple, clear letter, not from a lawyer but from me, addressed to Maya and Rohan. Mrs. Kapoor helped me with the language. It was calm, unequivocal, and devoid of anger. It stated that after careful consideration, I would not be transferring the apartment title. I had revoked all financial authorities and I would be paying only for my own guest expenses at the wedding, not the event itself. It concluded, "I love you, Maya, but I will not fund my own disappearance. Our relationship must now be built on something other than my money. I am always here for you as your mother, not as your financier." I signed it. I had it notarized. Mrs. Kapoor also advised a step that felt both drastic and necessary, changing the locks on my apartment. "It's your home, you must feel secure in it," she said. I did it the same day. My plan was not about revenge. It was about re-establishing boundaries with the quiet finality of a locked door and a notary's seal. I didn't block Maya's number. I didn't scream or accuse. I simply removed the prize from the table. The wedding was still on the horizon, but I would no longer be its underwriter. I was a guest of honor in name only. The power had shifted silently in a hotel lounge and a modest law office. The mother they thought they could manage was gone. In her place was a woman who had finally decided to read the fine print of her own life. The confrontation did not happen in a dramatic showdown. It happened over the phone 2 days after my letter was delivered by recorded mail. Maya's voice was not hurt, it was incandescent with a fury she could barely contain. "What is this, Mom? This letter revoking authority, changing the locks? Have you lost your mind? Have you been talking to someone who's poisoning you against your own family?" I stood in my living room, looking out at the view they had coveted. My heart was pounding, but my voice was preternaturally calm. "The only poison was watching my daughter turn my love into a liability, Maya. I heard you. That night outside the wine bar, you called my home collateral for Rohan's promotion." The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the sound of their strategy collapsing. The pretense was gone. When she spoke again, her voice was low, cold, stripped of all familial warmth. It was the voice she probably used in court. "So, you were spying. How pathetic. That's what you've become. A lonely, suspicious old woman clinging to a pile of bricks. Do you think any of it will matter? Do you think we need you? You've just chosen to die alone." Each word was a scalpel expertly aimed, but the woman she was trying to wound was no longer there. The pain had been pre-lived in 1,000 small moments. Now, all I heard was the confirmation of my every fear. "I am choosing to live with dignity, Maya," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The wedding invoice will not be paid by me. You will need to manage your own celebration. I will attend as your mother if you wish me to, but I will not pay for the privilege of being erased." She hung up. The climax was not an explosion. It was the quiet, deafening sound of a line being severed. The wedding went ahead. It was a scaled-down affair, I later heard from a distant cousin. I did not attend. The day they married, I visited Arjun's grave in my old town. I placed flowers from our old garden on the stone. "I tried," I whispered to the quiet earth. "I lost her, but I found myself again. I hope you understand." The quiet in that cemetery was more peaceful than any wedding march could have been. The final, public consequence came weeks later. I received a call from a flustered Rohan. His tone was a bizarre mix of pleading and accusation. "Auntie, you have to fix this." The board, they got wind of the situation. That the property asset wasn't secured. They're questioning my stability, my judgment. The promotion, it's on hold. You need to call my chairman and explain this is just a family misunderstanding. I listened until he ran out of breath. "Rohan," I said softly, "it is not a misunderstanding. It was a plan, and plans have consequences. I am not responsible for your professional standing. You are." Then I gently placed the receiver back in its cradle. The satisfying click was the true climax. The consequence had landed not with my shouting but with my silence. Their own design had unraveled them. The aftermath was not happy, but it was peaceful. The siege was over. The phone stopped ringing. The envelopes from lawyers ceased. My apartment was quiet again, but the quiet was no longer lonely. It was mine. I filled it with books from my old collection, with plants that required no justification, with the soft music I liked. I established the literacy charity in Arjun's name. The work is small, humble. We buy books for village libraries. It feels like a circle completed, a way to honor the man who believed in the quiet power of words. The act of signing those grant checks gives me a deep, settled satisfaction no luxury purchase ever could. Maya and I have not spoken since the wedding. I hear snippets about her life. They are doing fine, comfortable. I feel a pang sometimes, a ghost pain for the daughter I carried, the child I sang to sleep. But I do not miss the woman she became. The love is there, but it is a love for a memory placed carefully in an album on a shelf. It no longer has the power to devastate me. I learned that wealth is a mirror. It doesn't change people, it shows them who they are, magnified. For some, it magnifies generosity. For others, like my daughter, it magnified an entitlement that was always there, waiting for the fuel to ignite it. The moral of my story is not that money is evil or that children are ungrateful. It is that your no is the most valuable thing you own. Guard it, say it calmly, and mean it. Love should not require the surrender of your home, your voice, or your soul. True love expands you, it doesn't seek to erase you. I thought losing my daughter would break me. Instead, it returned me to myself. I am no longer just a mother or a widow or an heir. I am a woman sitting in the sunlight of her own home, at peace with the choices she made. And sometimes that is the richest ending of all. If this real-life story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes the quietest battles are the hardest fought. If you'd like more calm, reflective stories about family, love, and finding strength, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you for listening.